He gave an orphaned alien cub shelter. Moments later, its deadly guardian arrived. On the edge of a dying world, a human made a simple choice. He opened his shelter to a trembling alien cub, but when the ground shook and its deadly guardian appeared, his act of kindness turned into a moment that could decide the fate of two species. The unexpected visitor. The twin moons of Kepler 442b cast their pale green light across the barren landscape as Marcus Chen finished his evening inspection of the mining equipment. The automated extractors hummed steadily in the distance, pulling rare minerals from deep within the planet's crust. He had been alone at Outpost 7 for 3 months now, and he preferred it that way. After 20 years in the Colonial Defense Forces, solitude felt like a luxury rather than a burden. Marcus wiped the grime from his hands and headed back toward his prefabricated shelter. The structure wasn't much to look at, just a standard colonial habitat module with reinforced walls to withstand the planet's occasional dust storms, but it was home. He had chosen this assignment specifically because it was isolated. The nearest human settlement was 500 kilometers away, across a stretch of hostile terrain that discouraged casual visitors. As he approached the shelter's entrance, something made him stop. His military training, dormant but never forgotten, sent a warning signal through his nervous system. Something was different. The motion sensor he had installed near the storage units hadn't triggered, but there was a disturbance in the carefully raked gravel he used to track movement around his perimeter. Small footprints, unlike any he had seen before. Marcus drew his sidearm, a habit that would probably never leave him, and followed the tracks. They led around the side of his shelter to the waste disposal unit. As he rounded the corner, weapon raised, he froze at the sight before him. A small figure no taller than his waist was desperately clawing through the sealed waste containers. The creature was humanoid in basic structure, but covered in fine, iridescent scales that shifted from deep purple to blue in the moonlight. Its limbs were thin to the point of emaciation, and Marcus could count every rib through its scaled skin. Large, multifaceted eyes dominated its face, and when it noticed him, those eyes reflected his image 1,000 times over. The creature made a sound somewhere between a whimper and a hiss, pressing itself against the wall. Its movements were weak, uncoordinated. This wasn't a threat. This was a child, and it was starving. Marcus slowly holstered his weapon and raised his empty hands. "Easy there," he said in the calmest voice he could manage. "I'm not going to hurt you." The alien child tilted its head, processing the sounds. It probably couldn't understand him, but tone was universal. Marcus took a step back, giving it space, and noticed how the child's eyes tracked his every movement with desperate intensity. "Hungry?" Marcus asked, miming eating. He pointed to his mouth, then his stomach. The child's eyes widened slightly, and it made a soft clicking sound that Marcus interpreted as acknowledgement. Moving slowly to avoid startling the creature, Marcus backed toward his shelter's entrance. "Come on," he said, gesturing for the child to follow. "Food, inside." The alien child hesitated, swaying slightly on its feet. Marcus could see it was weighing desperation against fear. Finally, hunger won. The child took a tentative step forward, then another, following Marcus at a distance. Inside the shelter, Marcus moved to his food storage unit. He had plenty of supplies, enough for 6 months if necessary. The monthly supply drops ensured he never ran short. He pulled out a variety of items: protein bars, dried fruit, synthetic meat, even some fresh vegetables from his small hydroponic garden. The child's eyes grew impossibly wide at the sight of so much food. It made a keening sound that tore at Marcus's heart. How long had this child been without food? Where were its parents? Marcus selected items that seemed safest for an unknown digestive system. Simple proteins, basic carbohydrates, water. He placed them on a low table and stepped back. The child approached cautiously, picked up a protein bar and sniffed it. Then, with careful precision that spoke of intelligence despite its young age, it took a small bite. The effect was immediate. The child's eyes closed in what could only be described as bliss. It took another bite, then another, eating with controlled desperation. Marcus watched, fascinated by the way the child's scales seemed to brighten slightly as it ate, shifting from dull purple to a healthier blue-violet hue. While the child ate, Marcus activated his universal translator, a standard piece of colonial equipment. The device began analyzing the soft clicks and chirps the child made between bites. After several minutes, it produced a rough translation matrix. "More?" The device rendered when the child made a particular sound while looking at the empty protein bar wrapper. Marcus smiled and provided another bar, along with some water. "What's your name?" he asked, hoping the translator could convey the question. The child made a series of sounds that the translator struggled with before producing. "Zix. Zix," Marcus repeated. "I'm Marcus. Where are your parents, Zix?" The child's scales darkened, shifting toward deep purple. "Mother. Hunting. Danger comes, Hunger. Sorry." "No need to apologize," Marcus said gently. "When did you last see your mother?" 3 sun cycles." The translator added a note that this likely meant 3 days in local time. 3 days. A child this young alone for 3 days in this hostile environment. Marcus felt a surge of protective instinct he hadn't experienced since his military days, when he'd helped evacuate colonists from war zones. "You can stay here," Marcus offered, "until your mother comes back. Safe here." Zix's multifaceted eyes studied him with an intensity that seemed beyond its years. "You different. Other humans chase, hurt, you feed." Marcus's jaw tightened. There were illegal hunting parties that sometimes came to the outer colonies, looking for exotic species to sell on the black market. The thought that they might have been hunting this child and its family made his blood boil. "Not all humans are the same," Marcus said. "I won't hurt you. I promise." For the next hour, Marcus watched as Zix slowly consumed food and water, the child's strength visibly returning. The scales continued to brighten, and its movements became more coordinated. Marcus set up a sleeping pad in the corner, creating a small nest-like space that seemed to comfort the child. As Zix began to doze, exhaustion finally overcoming hunger, Marcus found himself thinking about the implications. An alien child, clearly sapient, alone and starving. Where was its family? What had driven them to this remote planet? And what kind of danger had Zix mentioned? A soft alarm from his perimeter sensors interrupted his thoughts. Marcus checked the display and saw movement approaching from the wasteland. Something large, moving with purpose directly toward his shelter. Zix suddenly sat up, scales shifting to an excited blue-green. "Mother!" The child clicked, the translator barely keeping up. "Mother comes!" Marcus moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. What he saw made him reach reflexively for his weapon, though he didn't draw it. A figure was approaching, tall and graceful despite its size. As it entered the range of his shelter's lights, Marcus got his first clear look at an adult of Zix's species. She was magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. Standing at least 7 feet tall, she moved with the controlled power of an apex predator. Her scales were a deeper, richer purple than Zix's, with patterns of silver that seemed to form natural armor across vital areas. Forearms, each ending in clawed hands, moved independently as she approached. Her eyes, like Zix's but larger, reflected the lights in a dizzying array, and she was armed. Marcus could see what looked like energy weapons integrated into forearm gauntlets, and the way she moved suggested extensive combat training. Zix ran to the door before Marcus could stop the child. "No, wait." But Zix had already activated the door release. The adult alien entered, and Marcus found himself face to face with one of the most formidable beings he had ever encountered. Her multifaceted eyes took in everything at once. The shelter, Marcus, and most importantly, Zix, who ran to her with obvious joy. She scooped up the child with her lower pair of arms while her upper pair remained free, one hand moving to what Marcus recognized as a weapon control. She spoke in rapid clicks and chirps, her tone a mixture of relief and suspicion. The translator worked overtime, finally producing, "You fed my child?" Marcus kept his hands visible and his posture non-threatening. "Yes," Zix was hungry. "I helped." The alien mother studied him for a long moment. Then, surprising Marcus, she lowered her weapon hand. "I am Layara, warrior scout of the Kirathi. You have shown kindness. This is unexpected from humans. Not all humans are the same." Marcus repeated what he had told Zix. "Your child was in need. I helped. That's all." Liara's scales shifted through several colors. What Marcus was beginning to understand was emotional expression. "The child says you offered shelter, safety. This is significant." She set Zix down and approached Marcus. Even with his military background, Marcus felt intimidated by her presence. She moved with the kind of lethal grace he had seen in special forces operators, but with an alien fluidity that was both beautiful and unnerving. "You are not like the others who came before." Liara said, her head tilting in a way that reminded Marcus of a raptor studying prey. They had weapons, cages, they wanted to take us. Sell us, slavers, Marcus said with disgust. They're not supposed to be able to operate in this sector, but the colonial authorities can't patrol everywhere. They killed my mate, Liara said, her scales darkening to almost black. I killed them in return, but more will come. They always do. Marcus felt the weight of her words. A mother and child hunted alone on a hostile world. His isolation suddenly seemed like a luxury he didn't deserve. You can stay here tonight, Marcus offered. Rest, resupply. I have food, water, medical supplies if you need them. Liara's scales shifted to something Marcus couldn't interpret. Why? What do you gain from this? It was a fair question. Marcus thought about it before answering. I've seen enough death and suffering in my life. If I can prevent a little more, especially for a child, then that's enough gain for me. The Guardian's arrival, the morning light of Kepler 442b's binary stars filtered through the shelter's reinforced windows, casting strange double shadows across the floor. Marcus woke to find Liara standing guard by the entrance, her forearms positioned in what he recognized as a defensive stance. She hadn't slept at all. You could have rested, Marcus said, moving to prepare breakfast. The perimeter sensors would alert us to any approach. Liara's multifaceted eyes tracked his movement without her head turning, an unsettling ability that Marcus was still getting used to. Your technology is impressive, but I trust my own senses more. 20 years of being hunted teaches you not to rely on anything but yourself. 20 years. Marcus paused in his food preparation. How long have your people been targeted by slavers? Since first contact with the Galactic Consortium, Liara replied, her scales shifting to a deep purple red that Marcus was learning meant anger. They classified us as exotic biologicals rather than sapient beings. The classification stands despite evidence of our intelligence, our culture, our civilization. It makes us legal to hunt, to own, to sell. Marcus felt his own anger rising. He'd seen similar injustices during his military service. Species denied rights based on arbitrary classifications made by those in power. That's not right. The colonial authority could petition for reclassification. Some have tried, Liara admitted, but the consortium has influence and Karathi are valuable. Our scales can be processed into high-grade armor. Our optical system makes us prized as scouts and pilots. And some... She paused, her scales darkening further. Some value us as entertainment. Marcus didn't need her to elaborate. He'd seen enough of the galaxy's dark corners to understand. He focused on preparing food, making enough for all three of them. Zix emerged from the makeshift nest, scales bright with healthy coloration after a night of proper rest and nutrition. Morning, little one, Marcus said, and Zix responded with a series of happy clicks that needed no translation. As they ate, Marcus studied his guests more carefully. Liara's forearms moved with independent precision, two handling food while the others remained alert, occasionally adjusting her weapons. Her scales weren't just beautiful. They were functional, overlapping in a way that would deflect energy weapons and possibly even projectiles. The silver patterns he'd noticed weren't random, but followed major muscle groups and vital organ placement. Natural armor evolved over millions of years. Zix, meanwhile, showed the curiosity Marcus would expect from any child. The young Karathi examined everything in the shelter with those remarkable eyes, asking questions that the translator sometimes struggled to convey. What makes the light? Zix asked, pointing at a lamp. Electricity, Marcus explained. Energy flowing through special materials that glow, like the hunting ship's weapons but controlled? Marcus was impressed by the connection. Exactly like that. Same energy, different purpose. Liara watched their interaction with interest. You have patience with questions. This is uncommon. I used to teach, Marcus said, before the military. Engineering students at the Colonial Technical Institute. I always believed questions were the path to understanding. You were a warrior? Liara asked, her posture shifting slightly. Marcus recognized it as increased respect. Combat engineer. 20 years in the Colonial Defense Forces. I built things, fixed things, and sometimes had to defend what I built. Yet you choose isolation now. Marcus shrugged. War takes pieces of you. I came here to find the pieces I lost, or maybe to learn to live without them. Liara's scales shifted to a pattern he hadn't seen before, almost iridescent. I understand this. Battle leaves marks that do not show on skin or scale. They continued eating in companionable silence until Marcus's perimeter alarm chimed. Not the urgent tone of a proximity breach, but the steady pulse that meant scheduled arrival. Marcus checked his chronometer and groaned. Supply drop, he explained to Liara's questioning look. Automated drone delivery happens monthly. Problem is, it'll record any life signs in the area and transmit back to the colonial base. Liara immediately went into threat assessment mode, all 4 arms moving to ready positions. They will know we are here? Not necessarily who you are, just that there are non-human life forms present. But if anyone's looking for you, they will know where to find us, Liara finished. She turned to Zix and spoke in rapid Kirathi. The child's scales dimmed with disappointment but nodded understanding. We should leave, Liara said to Marcus. You have shown kindness, but we will not bring danger to your shelter. Marcus made a decision that surprised even him. No, stay. I'll handle the drone. He moved to his communication console and input his override codes. As the senior maintenance officer for this sector, he had certain privileges. The drone's approach slowed as it received new instructions. Contamination protocol activated, Marcus announced to the automated system. Potential biological hazard detected. Implementing quarantine procedures. No detailed scanning authorized until contamination cleared. The drone acknowledged with a series of beeps. It would still deliver supplies but wouldn't perform its usual detailed environmental scan. Marcus watched on his screen as it deposited the supply crates 50 meters from the shelter and departed without incident. You lied for us, Liara said, her tone unreadable. I filed a false report, Marcus corrected. Different thing entirely. And it won't hold forever. Someone will eventually come to verify the contamination. But it buys us time. Time for what? Marcus turned to face her. To figure out a better solution than you running forever. You mentioned the consortium classifies your species as non-sapient. That classification can be challenged, but it requires evidence, documentation, and most importantly, advocates within the system. Liara's scales rippled with what might have been skepticism. You would do this? Risk your standing with your own kind? My standing isn't worth much if I let a child and his mother be hunted like animals, Marcus replied firmly. Before Liara could respond, another alarm sounded. This one was different, urgent, and sharp. Marcus's blood ran cold as he recognized it. Multiple contacts approaching fast, not using standard colonial approach vectors. Slavers, Liara hissed, her scales immediately shifting to a dark combat coloration that made her almost invisible in the shadows of the shelter. Marcus checked his tactical display. 3 ships, light combat configuration, coming in low to avoid standard detection grids. They'd be here in minutes. How did they find us so fast? Marcus muttered, mind racing through possibilities. They have been following us for weeks, Liara explained quickly. I thought we had lost them in the wasteland storms, but they are persistent. Well-funded. They want us specifically. Why specifically you? Liara hesitated, then pulled Zix close. My mate was Qatar, high warrior of our clan. His death was meant to be a message to other Kirathi. Even our strongest can be taken. But they did not expect me to kill their hunting party. Now it is about pride as much as profit. Marcus moved to his weapons locker, pulling out equipment he'd hoped never to use again. Then they're about to learn that humans don't take kindly to slavers either. He looked at Liara. Can you fight? Her forearms spread wide, energy weapons charging on her gauntlets while wicked curved blades extended from hidden sheaths. I am Kirathi. We were fighting wars among the stars when your species was learning to use fire. The question is, can you keep up? Despite the situation, Marcus found himself grinning. Let's find out. He handed Zix a small emergency beacon. Little one, remember the hidden spot I showed you yesterday? The one in the rock formation? Zix nodded, scales flickering with fear but also determination. Go there now. Take this. If something happens to us, press this button. It will bring help from the colonial base. Good help, people I trust. But Mother, we'll fight better knowing you are safe. Liara interrupted gently but firmly. Go, my spark. Show them that Kirathi young are clever as well as brave. Zix scampered out the back exit, disappearing into the rocky terrain with impressive speed and agility. Marcus activated the shelter's defensive systems, military-grade hardware he'd installed but never tested. Shields shimmered to life around the structure, while automated turrets emerged from hidden positions. Impressive, Liara commented. You anticipated need for defense. Old habits, Marcus replied, checking his rifle's charge. I've found that the universe tends to punish the unprepared. The first slaver ship came into visual range, a sleek, predatory thing designed for pursuit and capture rather than heavy combat. Marcus recognized the configuration, consortium standard, which meant predictable weaknesses. They'll try to disable our shields first, Marcus said, then gas the entire area to knock us unconscious. Standard capture protocol. Then we do not give them the chance. Liara moved toward the door. I will draw their fire. You target their engines. Negative, Marcus said sharply, falling back into military terminology. We work together or not at all. I've seen what happens when people try to be heroes. Liara studied him for a moment, then inclined her head. What do you suggest? Marcus pulled up a holographic display of the surrounding terrain. There's a canyon system about 200 meters north. Natural cover limits their air superiority. We make them come to us on foot. And if they simply bombard the area, then we'll learn if my shield generators are as good as the military contractors claimed. The first energy blasts struck the shelter's shields, sending ripples of blue light across the protective barrier. The slavers were testing, probing for weaknesses. Marcus knew they wouldn't find any, not yet, but the shields wouldn't hold forever against sustained assault. Ready? He asked Liara. Her response was to cycle all 4 weapons simultaneously, the sound like a symphony of controlled violence. I have been ready for 20 years. The hunter becomes the hunted. The slaver's tactical approach was textbook, which told Marcus he was dealing with professionals rather than opportunists. 3 ships maintaining triangular formation, each covering the other's blind spots while they pounded the shelter's shields with measured bursts. They were conserving ammunition, planning for a siege rather than an assault. They're trying to wear us down, Marcus observed, watching the shield integrity readings slowly decline. At this rate, we have maybe 30 minutes before the barriers fail. Liara stood perfectly still, but Marcus could see her scales shifting through rapid color changes, like a computer processing data. They do not know about the canyon system. We can use this. My thoughts exactly. Marcus pulled up his tactical display again, but we need to make them think they're winning first. Draw them in. He programmed a sequence into the shield generator, setting it to simulate progressive failure. To external sensors, it would appear their defenses were weakening faster than they actually were. Then he triggered several small explosives he'd planted months ago in the surrounding rocks, creating the illusion of shield feedback damage. The effect was immediate. The slavers increased their rate of fire, sensing victory. One ship broke formation, moving closer for what its pilot must have thought would be the killing blow. Now, Marcus said. He triggered the shelter's hidden surprise, a military-grade EMP mine he'd salvaged from his old unit's equipment. The pulse washed over the approaching ship, sending it spinning as its systems frantically rebooted. It crashed into the desert floor, throwing up a cloud of red dust. One down, Marcus said with grim satisfaction. The remaining 2 ships immediately pulled back, their pilots reassessing the situation. Marcus could imagine their conversation. The target had military hardware. This wasn't going to be as easy as expected. A voice crackled over the communications system, speaking accented colonial standard. This is Captain Vex of the consortium vessel Profit Margin. You are harboring stolen biological assets. Surrender them immediately and we will allow you to live. Marcus activated the transmitter. This is Marcus Chen, Colonial Defense Forces, retired. The beings under my protection are not property, and you are in violation of Colonial Territory Statute 314B. Leave immediately or face the consequences. There was a pause before Vex responded, his tone amused. Retired military playing protector? How noble. How feudal. We have legal salvage rights to any non-classified biological entities. The Kyrathi you're hiding are worth more than you can imagine. They're people, Marcus said flatly. Not salvage. The Consortium Classification Board disagrees. Last chance, human. Give us the female and the offspring and we leave you in peace. Marcus looked at Liara, who had listened to the exchange with scales darkening to the color of dried blood. She spoke quietly, but her voice carried steel. I will die before I let them take Zix. Then we're in agreement, Marcus replied. He activated the transmitter again. Captain Vex, you want them? Come and take them. The response was immediate and violent. Both remaining ships opened fire with everything they had. The shelter's shields flared brilliant blue, then white, then failed entirely with a sound like breaking glass. But Marcus and Liara were already moving, sprinting from the shelter through a pre-planned exit route as enemy fire demolished the structure behind them. They ran toward the canyon system, Marcus's knowledge of the terrain giving them the advantage. Behind them, he could hear the ships adjusting position, trying to track their movement. A blast of energy seared past his shoulder, close enough that he felt the heat through his armor. Liara moved like liquid motion beside him, her forearms maintaining perfect balance as she navigated the rough ground. She returned fire over her shoulder without looking, her multifaceted eyes apparently capable of independently tracking targets. One of her shots must have connected because Marcus heard cursing over an open comm channel. They reached the canyon entrance just as the slavers deployed ground troops. Marcus counted at least 8 figures in combat armor rappelling from the hovering ships, professional mercenaries judging by their coordinated movements. Into the canyon, Marcus urged, but Liara had stopped, her scales suddenly shifting to a pattern he hadn't seen before, almost mirror-like. "What are you?" "Adapting," she said simply. Then she did something that defied Marcus's understanding of biology. Her scales began to shift and rearrange, taking on the exact color and texture of the canyon walls. Within seconds, she was nearly invisible. "Natural camouflage," she explained, seeing his amazement. "A hunting adaptation. Your turn." She produced a small device from her belt and sprayed Marcus with something that tingled on his skin and armor. His equipment immediately began to take on the same adaptive coloration. "Kyrathi technology?" he asked. "Borrowed from those who hunted us. We learn from our enemies." They moved deeper into the canyon, using the natural acoustics to their advantage. Every sound the mercenaries made echoed and distorted, making it impossible for them to track by audio. Marcus had counted on this when choosing the location. The first mercenary to enter their kill zone never saw the attack coming. Liara struck from what seemed like empty air, her forearms working in deadly coordination. 2 arms disabled his weapon while the other 2 applied precise pressure to what must have been universal pressure points. The mercenary dropped unconscious in seconds. Marcus dragged the body behind cover and quickly stripped it of useful equipment. Military-grade comm unit, 2 plasma grenades, and most importantly, a tactical scanner that would show the positions of the other mercenaries. 7 more, he whispered to Liara, showing her the display. "Split formation, trying to flank us. Then we split them further." Liara took one of the plasma grenades, her alien features showing what might have been a smile. "Your species makes effective weapons." They separated, using the canyon's maze-like structure to their advantage. Marcus relied on his military training, setting ambush points and using the mercenaries' own communications against them by feeding false position reports through the stolen comm unit. He watched through a crack in the rocks as 2 mercenaries approached his position. They were good, checking corners and maintaining overlapping fields of fire, but they were used to hunting scared refugees, not dealing with trained military personnel. Marcus triggered another of his pre-positioned charges, not to kill but to disorient. The explosion sent rocks tumbling, creating a dust cloud that obscured vision. In the confusion, he struck. His rifle butt connected with one mercenary's helmet, sending him stumbling into his partner. Before either could recover, Marcus had zip-tied their hands and disabled their weapons. A scream echoed through the canyon, followed by the distinctive sound of Liara's energy weapons. Marcus checked the tactical scanner. 3 more dots had disappeared. "Abort! Abort!" someone shouted over the comms. "Target is defended by unknown military asset. Request immediate extraction." But Vex's voice cut through the chatter, cold and furious. "Negative. Complete the mission. Double payment for whoever brings me the Kyrathi female." Greed overcame fear for the remaining mercenaries. They regrouped and advanced more aggressively, using suppressing fire to limit movement options. Marcus found himself pinned behind rapidly disintegrating cover. Then Liara appeared above them, having somehow scaled the sheer canyon wall. She dropped into their midst like an avenging spirit, her forearms wielding both energy weapons and those curved blades with lethal precision. The mercenaries, trained to fight conventional opponents, had no defense against her multi-limbed assault style. Marcus provided covering fire, picking off any mercenary who tried to target Liara. Together, they formed a devastating combination of human tactical knowledge and alien physical superiority. Within minutes, it was over. The surviving mercenaries were either unconscious or fleeing back to their ships. But Vex wasn't finished. Orbital strike authorized, his voice crackled over the comms. Flatten the entire canyon. Marcus's blood ran cold. The ships were moving into bombardment position. They had maybe seconds before the entire area became a crater. The child? Liara said urgently. Zix is safe, Marcus assured her. The hiding spot is shielded underground. But we need cover now. He grabbed her arm and pulled her toward a narrow crevice he'd identified months ago during his explorations. It led to a natural cave system, deep enough to survive aerial bombardment. They squeezed through just as the first orbital strikes hit. The ground shook violently and the sound was deafening. Rocks fell from the ceiling as the bombardment continued, each strike designed to penetrate deeper into the earth. Marcus and Liara pressed against the cave wall, her scales shifting to a protective configuration that seemed to harden into actual armor. She pulled him close, shielding him with two of her arms while the other two braced against the cave walls. The gesture was protective, intimate in a way that transcended species differences. The bombardment lasted for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. When it finally stopped, the silence was almost as shocking as the noise had been. They think we're dead, Marcus said, coughing from the dust. Let them think it, Liara replied. Her scales had returned to their normal configuration, though Marcus noticed she hadn't let go of him yet. But they will land to confirm, to collect bodies for bounty confirmation. Then we make sure they find some. Marcus pulled out his emergency beacon, but instead of activating it, he modified its signal. This will transmit biometric data suggesting we're buried under tons of rock. Weak life signs getting weaker. They'll think we're dying slowly. Liara's multifaceted eyes studied him with what he was learning to recognize as admiration. You think like a hunter. Deception within deception. They waited in the cave as the scanner showed the ship's landing. Several figures emerged, including one that moved with the arrogant swagger that had to be Captain Vex himself. Marcus watched through a small periscope he'd extended through a crack in the rocks. Vex was human, which somehow made it worse. Tall and lean with expensive armor and cybernetic enhancements that marked him as someone who profited greatly from others' misery. He directed his remaining men to search the bombardment site. Life signs detected, one mercenary reported. Weak but present. About 30 meters down. Dig them out, Vex ordered. I want confirmation of death, and the female scales are worth a fortune even damaged. As the mercenaries began excavation efforts, Marcus and Liara moved through the cave system. Marcus knew these tunnels. He'd mapped them during his first month here out of boredom and habit. They emerged behind the landed ships completely undetected. Their mistake, Liara whispered, was assuming prey always runs. Time to become hunters? Marcus asked. Her scales shifted to what he now knew was her battle configuration. Time to end this. A new beginning. Marcus and Liara struck simultaneously from different angles. Marcus disabled the ship's communication arrays with precise shots while Liara infiltrated the nearest vessel. Her natural camouflage made her nearly invisible against the ship's hull as she moved toward the engine compartments. The skeleton crew left behind never stood a chance. They were pilots and technicians, not combat personnel. Marcus neutralized them with non-lethal shots, zip-tying them to their seats. No need for unnecessary killing, despite what they'd tried to do. Liara's work in the engine room was more permanent. She didn't just disable the systems. She reconfigured them in ways that would take weeks to repair. When she emerged, her scales flickered with satisfaction. 2 ships grounded, she reported. Now for their leader. They could hear Vex shouting over the comms, demanding status reports that would never come. The mercenaries at the excavation site were starting to realize something was wrong. But Marcus had one more surprise prepared. He activated his final contingency, a Colonial Defense Forces emergency beacon he'd kept hidden. Not the small unit he'd given Zix, but a military-grade transmitter that would reach the nearest base with a Priority 1 distress signal. Colonial forces inbound, he announced over the mercenaries' comm channel. 15 minutes until arrival. Anyone still here will be arrested for attempted murder of a colonial citizen and trafficking in sapient beings. The reaction was immediate. Several mercenaries simply ran, heading for the remaining functional ship. Others looked to Vex for orders, but the captain was staring at the canyon with an expression of rage. You're bluffing, Vex snarled over the comms. Check your long-range sensors, Marcus replied calmly. There was a pause, then cursing. The Colonial Defense Forces took attacks on their veterans seriously, and 3 heavy patrol ships were indeed burning toward their position at maximum speed. "This isn't over," Vex promised. "The consortium has a long memory and deep pockets. So does the Colonial Defense Force," Marcus countered. "And they're about to have detailed recordings of your attempted murder and slaving operation. I suggest you run." Vex made a gesture and his remaining mercenaries retreated to the functional ship. Within minutes they were airborne and fleeing toward the edge of colonial space. Marcus watched them go with mixed feelings. Part of him wanted to ensure Vex never threatened anyone again, but that wasn't his call to make anymore. "Mother," Zix's voice brought Marcus back to the present. The young Karathi burst from his hiding spot and ran toward them, scales bright with relief. Liara caught him with all 4 arms, holding him close while making soft clicking sounds that needed no translation. Marcus watched the reunion with a warmth in his chest he hadn't felt in years. This was why he'd fought, not for abstract principles or governmental authority, but for a mother and child who deserved to live free from fear. "The colonial forces will be here soon," he told Liara. "They'll have questions." "Will they try to take us?" Liara asked, her scales shifting to defensive patterns even as she held Zix. "Not if I have anything to say about it. The commander of this sector is an old friend, Sarah Martinez. She's fair, and she's been pushing for reform of the classification system for years." As if on cue, 3 colonial patrol ships descended from the sky, their landing thrusters kicking up clouds of red dust. The lead ship's ramp lowered and a woman in commander's insignia strode out, flanked by a security detail. Sarah Martinez hadn't changed much in the 5 years since Marcus had last seen her. Still sharp-eyed and professional, with gray creeping into her dark hair that somehow made her look more authoritative rather than older. "Marcus Chen," she said, stopping a respectful distance away. "When I got your emergency beacon, I thought the system was malfunctioning. You swore you were done with excitement." "Plans change," Marcus replied. "Sarah, I'd like you to meet Liara and Zix. They're under my protection." Sarah's eyes took in the alien mother and child. Noting Liara's defensive posture and the way Marcus had positioned himself slightly between them and the colonial forces. "Kirathi," she said, "the consortium's been flooding our channels with demands for their return." "The consortium can go to hell," Marcus said flatly. Sarah's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. "That's essentially what I told them, though in more diplomatic terms." She looked directly at Liara. "I've reviewed the scans of this incident. You were defending yourselves against unprovoked attack. The colonial authority recognizes your right to self-defense." Liara's scales shifted, showing confusion. "But we are classified as—" "That classification is currently under emergency review," Sarah interrupted. "The footage Marcus's equipment captured shows clear evidence of sapience, tool use, language, and social structure. It'll take time to make it official, but I've been authorized to grant you temporary protected status." "That's not enough," Marcus said. "They need permanent residence, full rights, which is why I'm also here with a job offer," Sarah continued. "For both of you," Marcus blinked. "What?" Sarah gestured to the destroyed outpost and damaged terrain. "The colonial authority needs a new kind of facility here. A research station, but also a diplomatic outpost. Somewhere we can properly study and understand new species. Help them integrate if they choose. Someone needs to run it." She looked at Marcus. "Someone with military experience to handle security, engineering knowledge to maintain the facility, and proven ability to work with non-human species." Then she turned to Liara. "And someone who understands what it's like to be hunted, who can help other refugees and ensure their safety. Your combat skills and technological knowledge would be invaluable." Liara's scales rippled through a spectrum of colors Marcus couldn't interpret. "You would trust us with this?" "I trust Marcus," Sarah said simply. "And Marcus clearly trusts you. That's enough for me." Marcus looked at Liara, seeing the same uncertainty he felt reflected in her multifaceted eyes. This was a huge step, a commitment neither of them had expected. "What about the consortium?" Liara asked. "They will not give up easily. Let them try," Sarah said with steel in her voice. "They attacked a colonial citizen on colonial soil. We've frozen their assets in our space and issued warrants for Vex and his crew. The consortium wants a fight. They'll find the colonial authority ready." Zix tugged at Marcus's hand and he knelt to the child's level. Through the translator, Zix asked, We stay with you? Marcus felt the weight of the moment. A week ago, he'd been alone by choice, hiding from the universe and his own past. Now he was being offered a chance at something new, something meaningful, a purpose, a family of sorts, and the opportunity to make a real difference. He looked up at Liara. What do you think? Her scales shifted to that iridescent pattern he'd learned meant deep emotion. I think the universe rarely offers second chances. My people have a saying, when the stars align, only fools close their eyes. She extended one of her hands to him, claws retracted, palm open. A gesture of trust and partnership. Marcus took her hand without hesitation. Then we accept. 6 months later, the new facility stood complete, a marvel of human engineering and Karathi innovation. The main structure was 3 times the size of Marcus's old shelter, with separate wings for research, medical facilities, and living quarters. Energy shields shimmer around the perimeter, but they were designed for protection, not isolation. Marcus stood in the command center, reviewing reports from their latest rescue mission. They'd successfully extracted a family of Zelani refugees from consortium hunters, bringing their total to 15 different species granted sanctuary. Another successful operation, Liara said, entering the room with her usual fluid grace. She'd adapted to her new role remarkably well, serving as both security chief and refugee liaison. Her understanding of being hunted gave her unique insight into helping others. The Zelani are settling in well, Marcus reported. Their ability to photosynthesize will actually help with our food production once they're comfortable enough to contribute. And Zix has already made friends with their younglings, Liara added with what Marcus had learned to recognize as maternal pride. He's becoming quite the ambassador himself. It was true. Zix had shown remarkable ability to connect with young beings of all species, his natural curiosity and friendliness breaking down barriers that adults might struggle with. Speaking of Zix, Marcus said, his engineering scores are off the charts. Sarah's recommended him for the accelerated program when he's old enough. Liara's scales shimmered with pride, but also something else. She moved closer to Marcus, all 4 arms gesturing, and what he'd learned was nervousness. There's something I need to tell you, she said, about Karathi biology and about us. Marcus set down his datapad, giving her his full attention. Over the months, their relationship had evolved from alliance to friendship to something deeper, though neither had put words to it. When Karathi form bonds, Liara began, it triggers certain biological changes, adaptations that allow for long-term partnership despite differences in species. What kind of adaptations? Liara's scales shifted to that beautiful iridescent pattern. I'm developing the ability to process human food more efficiently. My sleep patterns are syncing with yours. And she paused, seeming to gather courage. I'm growing more emotionally attuned to you specifically. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. Is this involuntary? Are you saying your biology is forcing you to? No, Liara interrupted firmly. The changes only happen when the bond is chosen, wanted. My biology is responding to what I already feel. She reached out with 2 of her hands, taking both of his. Marcus Chen, you saved my child, gave us home, and showed us that not all humans are the same. But more than that, you've shown me that connection is possible even across the vast differences between us. Marcus squeezed her hands gently. Liara, An alarm interrupted him. Not an attack alert, but an arrival notification. Marcus checked the display and smiled. What is it? Liara asked. The first official diplomatic delegation from the Karathi homeworld, Marcus said. Your people's government is finally sending representatives to establish formal relations with the colonial authority. Liara's scales rippled with shock. My people are coming here? Sarah pulled some strings. They'll be here in 3 days. And they've specifically asked to meet with you to hear your story. Liara was quiet for a moment, processing this news. Then she looked at Marcus with those remarkable eyes. Will you stand with me when I meet them? Always, Marcus promised. 3 days later, the Karathi delegation arrived in a ship that was a work of art as much as a vehicle. It landed with barely a whisper, its hull shifting colors like Liara's scales. The delegation was led by an elderly Karathi whose scales had taken on an almost pearl-like quality with age. He introduced himself as Elder Kaith, and his multifaceted eyes studied everything with sharp intelligence. Liara of the Storm Clan, he said formally. Your survival and the alliance you've built here has resonated across our worlds. You have shown that cooperation with humans is not only possible, but beneficial. Elder, Liara responded with equal formality, though Marcus could see her nervousness in the slight tremor of her scales. I have only done what was necessary to protect my child and help others in similar situations. And in doing so, Keith replied, you have opened doors we thought permanently closed. He turned to Marcus. And you, Marcus Chen, have proven that humanity can move beyond its reputation for exploitation. Some of us try, Marcus said simply. The formal meetings lasted for hours, discussing trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and most importantly, the push for full sapient rights for Karathi and other species. Marcus watched with pride as Liara navigated the complex negotiations with skill and wisdom. That evening, after the delegation had retired to their quarters, Marcus found Liara on the observation deck watching the stars. Zix was asleep in their quarters, exhausted from a day of showing young delegation members around the facility. You did amazingly today, Marcus said, joining her. I had a good partner, she replied, leaning against him in a gesture that had become natural between them. They stood in comfortable silence for a while before Liara spoke again. Elder Keith offered me a position, ambassador to the colonial authority. It would mean travel, prestige, and connection to my people. Marcus's heart sank, but he kept his voice steady. That's a great opportunity. You should— I declined, Liara interrupted. Marcus turned to look at her. Why? Because my home is here, she said simply. With you, with Zix, with the work we're doing. This facility has become more than just a refuge. It's becoming a symbol of what's possible when different species work together. She turned to face him fully, all four arms moving to embrace him. And because I love you, Marcus Chen. Not as a savior, not as a protector, but as a partner. As the person who makes me want to build a future, rather than just survive the present. Marcus pulled her close, feeling the now familiar warmth of her scales against his skin. I love you too, Liara. Completely, impossibly, and absolutely. They stood together under the alien stars, two beings from different worlds who had found something universal in each other. Around them, the facility hummed with life. Refugees becoming residents, former enemies becoming allies, and a vision of cooperation becoming reality. In the morning, there would be more rescues to plan, more diplomatic meetings to navigate, and more challenges to face. The consortium was still out there, weakened but not defeated. The fight for sapient rights would be long and difficult, but tonight they had each other and they had hope. And sometimes that was enough to change the universe. Zix found them there an hour later, waking from a nightmare about the slavers. Without words, they pulled him into their embrace, the three of them forming a family that transcended species, born from kindness and strengthened by choice. Are we safe? Zix asked through the translator. Marcus and Liara exchanged a look over his head, a moment of perfect understanding that needed no translation. We're home, Marcus said simply, and that's the safest place in the universe. As if in agreement, the facility's lights dimmed to evening mode, casting everything in a warm glow that made Liara's scales shimmer like captured starlight. Outside, the first graduates of their refugee program were preparing for their own diplomatic missions, carrying the message that cooperation was possible, that difference didn't mean enemy, and that sometimes the smallest act of kindness, like feeding a starving child, could reshape the destiny of worlds. The story that had begun with a desperate scratch at a lonely man's door had become something neither Marcus nor Liara could have imagined. A bridge between species, a beacon of hope, and proof that in the vast darkness of space, the light of compassion could still shine bright enough to guide the lost ones home.